Hi, and welcome to Conscious Awareness TV. Today we have Suresh Ramaswamy with us, and he will be talking to us about transforming your life. And I want to let you know if you do have any questions, please write them in on justin.tv/conscious TV. So, with that, I'd like to welcome Suresh to the show.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. So, transform your life. So, let's talk about how did you even get involved in transform your life and all this metaphysical, spiritual, conscious living?
Well, as far back as I can remember, I always had these deeper questions. What is life really about? And I wasn't satisfied with the typical answers I used to get. You're supposed to, get a solid education, get a good job, settle in a good place, and those sounded good, but clearly there was something big missing. And that led me to a lot of interesting and fascinating books covering psychology, philosophy of from different parts of the world, spirituality, and that was the beginnings of Transform Your Life, where I was personally interested in transforming my life.
Right.
And so personal growth was always a passion for me. Anytime I had time over the weekends, I would read books, I would listen to talks, and after many, many years, I discovered so many insights, so many breakthrough concepts that it occurred to me that some of this was really broadly applicable. It's not just me, but anybody else out there who was asking these kinds of questions. There was a lot I felt I had to share. And that's what led to Transform Your Life, the class, the workshop. I was invited to teach at the community college here, and then later on at community groups, bookstores, and it grew from there.
Wow. So what is it? What is the transforming life? You talk about spiritual principles. There's many things that you're talking about. So
Correct. Yeah, Transform Your Life is really such a broad concept. For me, what I saw is that as we embark on this journey, which is life, and we start trying to include in our lives those things which we feel will bring meaning, bring happiness, and over time we end up with quite a collection of things.
Yeah.
But oftentimes we find something big is still missing. And while we do have happiness, we've managed to figure out a lot of things. There's a lot of things which feel like there's still something key that's not quite there. And to me, that is really what Transform Your Life is addressing. Transform Your Life is really a framework for understanding and navigating life, so that one can find enduring happiness, one can maximize the growth one experiences, and really it's about accelerating one's evolution. That's really what Transform Your Life is about. So it really touches on all aspects of life. It's not so much go do this, but it really touches on really what matters in making life more meaningful and fulfilling.
So we're talking about relationships, financial, career, health.
Exactly, exactly. And a lot of times people embark on something like this and they discover spirituality, which is totally awesome. Metaphysics, philosophy, this stuff is just incredible. And
Can I
there's
take you back I didn't mean to interrupt you, but when you say discover spirituality,
Yes.
for the viewers and listeners, can you give them an idea of what that means when you say discovering spirituality or metaphysics?
Yes. Discovering spirituality it's going to look very different for different people.
Right.
For somebody, it's just being out on the beach and watching an incredible sunset. That something inside them is moved and they feel, I'm part of something big here and incredibly beautiful. And that is spirituality. It's not just these volumes that were written thousands of years back. For some people, it's being extremely close to somebody they love and feeling that oneness, feeling that expansiveness. That's spirituality. For somebody else, it's taking a walk in nature where they simply lose their sense of small identityness and feel something much bigger. That's spirituality. So for somebody else, it might look like actually studying these philosophies from ancient times and recognizing that, wait a minute, what this person said way back, it still applies to me, even though I've got a modern iPhone and I drive a car with GPS. This insight still appeals to me, it applies to me. So spirituality is going to look very different, But ultimately, it's about, I think, finding who we really are and what we're here for.
Right. Well, I love that because what really, when you think about, or people, the viewers and listeners, and I don't know, what came to me was feeling like it's not about just being in a sunset. I can see what you're saying about that being a being spirituality, but it's just so simple. Where you think that, oh gosh, if spirituality or metaphysics, it has to be something that's like working at a job you don't want to work at. Like it's this drudgery. Oh my gosh, I've got to go after this, and I've got to grow, or I've got to shift, and I got to change. It's just people may have this concept about. I don't want to say drudgery because I mean, to keep growing every day and living living consciously, because that's what the show is all about. Conscious Awareness TV is how showing people how to live consciously through the guests that we have. So I loved how you said that a sunset, and it is different for everybody, and then just in nature, and where it is picking up philosophy and learning different things.
Yes, exactly. And you're right. A lot of us, we think of philosophy and this is like incredibly boring stuff for a lot of people. But when you discover true spirituality, it's alive, it's meaningful, it's very energizing. That is, I feel, it's really hard to imagine somebody who wouldn't be drawn to these things when they really discover what it's about.
So when you say in that discovering what it's about, it's in those moments that we're sitting watching a sunset, and we feel that there is something much larger. What if that person's not in that consciousness of being able to recognize that? But so if they're out there going, well, I love sunsets, but I've never had that experience.
Yes.
What would you say to that? Because I know I have something I would say to that. But
yes. Well, actually, everybody has a very unique path to it. For some people, it might be that life presents some very, very challenging situation. Maybe they're thrown into deep depression, and they stay in that very dark place for a long time. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, they have some sort of insight that pulls them out of it, even if it's for a second. And that is the first glimpse of spirituality for them. It's not like a beautiful sunset, but for them, that was what took them there. In fact, even, Eckhart Tolle talks about his, experience where he was almost, suicidal.
right.
And went to sleep. Next day morning, woke up, and when he woke up, it was a very different world.
Right.
He could see the sunlight coming in through the window, the birds singing outside. So that's for him, that was the journey to spirituality. So it's going to look very different. For somebody else, it might be in a bookstore. Some book looks attractive, they're drawn to it, and before they know, they're like, wow, this applies to me. This can change the situation I'm going through. I'm having a lot of stress at work. That to them is spirituality.
Right. And what I think it's in that moment that you're saying is that when they pick up that book, and this is where the viewers and listeners, it's like what I hear you saying is that when that book resonates with you, that's when there's that moment of the synchronicities that we talk about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And for somebody, it might be hearing a talk or having a conversation with a friend where something inside is stirred, and there's something that is there for you to explore.
Right.
And that's how it really starts. And I think that's why I applaud what you're doing with Conscious Awareness TV, because I think for a lot of people, a conversation like this and other conversations you've had are very enlightening and opening up their minds. And it's taking that real inkling they had and really building on that to something that's more concrete, that's more tangible, and that can put them on a more conscious path.
Yeah.
That kind of leads to what I talk about a lot, which is ordinary life has a tendency to kind of suck us into a certain reality on this physical plane. We kind of feel stuck in the muck, if you will.
Yes.
It's
stuck
like
in a rut. Yeah.
it's like the stress at work, the stress at home, there's traffic, and all these things. They have a tendency to make you feel like, I am this body, mind, I am these emotions and personality, and I am in this physical space, and this is it. This is reality, and I'm feeling a lot of stress in this reality. It has a tendency to kind of make you feel like you're getting locked into a very small space, which is very constrictive, and nobody is to tell us that. It doesn't feel good, because our spirit is naturally expansive. If you try to put it in a box, it's going to try to push back. And in fact, the stress we feel is actually our evolutionary impulse, which is telling us there's a lot more to reality than what you're thinking.
I love it. Let's go back to evolutionary pulse. So I love that, how you said that.
Yeah, this impulse is there in all of us all the time, but we get distracted with the beautiful surroundings in our lives, with all the experiences that are presented to us. We have a tendency to get sucked into it and go chasing after these things. And time to time, there's this small voice which pops up, right? Hey, is this really what you want? And we say, yeah, we want to go ahead and have some incredible experience. Well, over a period of time, we discovered that these experiences, while they give us some degree of happiness, they are not reliable and robust.
Could you say another word that would be, for me, it's fulfillment. Like I don't feel fulfilled.
Yes.
I may be happy, I may be content, I may be, but that fulfillment, there's something
That's right. That's right. For a couple of moments we feel great, but then where is it? It kind of slips through our fingers almost, right? And we feel, oh, I got to now get something else. I need a promotion at work. I need a bonus, or I need a new relationship, or I need to go on the next vacation to wherever. We tend to gravitate towards these kinds of thoughts, and we go and chase these things, and eventually find out again there's that sense of not quite. That was good, but not quite. And that's the voice, if you will, inside all of us, egging us forward, that you cannot stop any place. You got to keep growing. And that leads us to things like Transform Your Life. Where Transform Your Life is really about going from unconscious growth to conscious growth. Where unconscious growth is just living life, going about things, and not being aware that one is really on a path of growth. And the shift from unconsciously growing, which tends to be slow and somewhat painful, and some might even call it, school of hard knocks, right?
But what about Eckhart Tolle? Like his happened in one day, although he was maybe depressed for a long time, but in one moment. I mean, it's possible, but...
Yes. Yeah. Well, the reality is that he had also been working on things, perhaps somewhat unconsciously, that all were building a foundation. I think that's key. All the things we do for personal growth, they create a foundation. When the breakthrough happens, then we have something reliable that we can maintain that.
Right.
Otherwise, we have a peak experience, then it's gone. Even spiritual experience can be very, transient, and we might feel like, oh, that was so good. I felt so good yesterday evening, but where is that now? You want to have a persistent, reliable sort of experience, which is really true spirituality. So what happens is really the first phase of conscious growth, which is really, I would say, once you embark on the conscious growth phase, life is a lot more fun. It's a lot more pleasant. There's not as many rude bumps along the way.
And when you're saying a conscious, what you're referring back to is being aware in the moment of knowing that, okay, it's not just this job, or it's moving outside of that.
Moving outside of that and saying that I am a conscious being who is consciously pursuing personal growth.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you're sitting and reading books all the time. It could be, like you said, you may be in a work context, but having it in your mind that I'm going to use this experience at work for growth.
Right.
And that makes a huge, huge difference.
Well, I'd like to bring up too, one, just because this kind of ties in what you're talking about. When you were talking about expanding, I want to bring in this situation with my apartment that I'm living in. It's very contained. And I kept feeling like this is a nice space, but it's just, there's something that I wasn't really liking about it. And then a friend of mine came over and she said, it's like living in a small city where you're stacked, right? Yes. And for me, because I love expansion, I love growth. So for me, that's what I realized, this space is not expanding. It's keeping me contracted into this. And that's why I'm feeling very uncomfortable in this space and that I want to get out. So, I mean, when you said that, I was like, wow, that's exactly how I feel in my apartment, that I want to be in a place where I can expand and I can feel like there's this openness and it's this large space.
That's a great analogy. That's exactly right. When we feel constrained, we naturally feel something's not quite right.
Yes, I'm not happy.
And conversely,
Yeah.
When you feel expansive, you feel really good
Yes.
for no reason.
Yes.
And that's a good sign that you're getting in touch with something deeper,
Yeah.
where it's not because, I bought a new pair of shoes or a new this or a new that. I just feel expansive and I feel good.
Right.
That kind of experience is a good sign that you're starting to go within.
Right.
But some of the viewers might be asking ourselves, that sounds good. What do I need to do to get going on that
Right.
path? I am interested in personal growth.
Yeah.
And so the way I see it is the journey of transformation, there's 3 major phases. The first phase is transcendence. And I'll just name them and we can go through it in a little more detail.
Well, how did you come up with the 3 phases? Was this something that you had learned on your own journey?
It's really synthesizing everything I've seen in the last several decades. I've realized it's really these 3. In fact, we can come back to this point later on. A lot of even sort of the folks who've been doing this for a long time, they mistake just one phase, like transcendence, to be the entire spiritual journey. And that can cause a whole set of issues down the road. So it's good to know, it's good to have a good map up front so that you'll get to your destination and you're at the right place.
So it's kind of like going from here to New York. You gotta have a map. You've got to know that where you're going.
Exactly.
You don't want to
end up in Ohio and
Right.
be thinking, this is New York.
Right.
That's a whole other
Yeah.
thing that people run into.
Well, and also along the way, it's really not the destination. It is actually the journey. It's where
Journey
our
is-
growth. Yeah.
Exactly.
Everything happens.
The
so.
journey itself is so much. And I think once you find out what the ground rules are and how to navigate this space, it's pretty enjoyable. And not to say there'll be no challenges. I don't want to paint that picture. There will be challenges, but these challenges now will be very different than the challenges that were in the School of Hard Knocks.
Well, and I think too, when you say challenges, what comes to me is really in all of this, what I have found in my own journey is that all these experiences, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, it really is, there's always a positive in this. And it's always a blessing after the fact. Like once I get past it, I was like, oh, now I see. Now I've gotten to the point where, okay, I don't really like this. It's uncomfortable, but yet I know that this person, place, or thing is really there to help in my growth, to help in my evolutionary.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And that's the difference right there. You talked about it, where as you're going through the experience, if you are aware that this is a growth experience, even though it doesn't feel pleasant,
Yes.
then first of all, it's not as dramatic, not as traumatic, even as it's happening,
Right.
which is a great relief, right? Who wants more of that? And furthermore, you still get the benefits, which is the learnings. You get it a lot faster.
Yeah.
Instead of stretching over 5 years, 10 years, lots of therapy, lots of all kinds of release techniques, then saying, okay, I get it now. You can get it like in a weekend,
Right.
a lot sooner to whenever the event happened, which suddenly now you feel not so scared anymore.
Right.
Because, hey, yeah, it was a couple of days of, pretty miserable, but I'm okay.
Right. But I also realized too in these experiences, and it's just for the viewers and listeners, they can really get a tangible of a real, really living this, is that I have to look at, if I'm involved in this situation, is it because I have to have the last word? Is it because I have to prove that I'm right? Is it because I have to get something from that?
Yes.
So in all this, and this is what we talk about on Conscious TV and Living Consciously, and what we're talking about is really as what is your intention? What is your motivation? So I'm looking at my own situations and experiences and going, what is it that I am trying to achieve out of this? And if I know, which we'll go talk about you, because you're saying once you know who you are, right? And once we have that feeling of enough, then there isn't anything outside of that person can give us more of.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so it's really in those, and that, to me, that is what it's about, living consciously and awakening. So I kind
Having
of have
a
step
fullness and completeness within,
Right.
so you're not being as grabbing of the surroundings and the situations around you.
Yeah, and letting that
Great point.
person or place or thing giving them the power over you, and realizing, in my world, I'm so full.
Yes.
And this is where I think faith and trust all come into, and acceptance all come in together. And have to come into alignment, because you have to have faith and trust that, okay, I'm not going to go ahead and go after that because I really do feel enough and I am full. But
very good point.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah, actually, the transcendence phase we were just talking about, Einstein said something very interesting, right? He said problems cannot be solved at the same level of consciousness that created them. And a lot of times when we're truly feeling stuck, we're trying to fix the problem, but staying at the same level of consciousness. So the problem doesn't get resolved in a reasonable or satisfactory manner. So the transcendence is about lifting your consciousness so that you can start seeing the forest instead of being lost in the trees. And when you see the forest, you instantly have insights. Nobody has to say anything. You instantly see the bigger patterns, the bigger picture, and you're able to be more generous and not wanting so much from anything else around you that's outside of you.
I want to go back to asking you about lifting your consciousness, because I feel that viewers and listeners have a question of what does that really mean?
Okay.
Is it shifting your perspective?
It's actually a very good question, and it's really hard to answer actually, because consciousness is something which we can barely describe. It's something that we're experiencing all the time, and yet when asked to describe it, it's like I'm not quite sure how to describe it, because it's really our experience of who we are. It's our experience of reality, and I think the best way to actually really get to know consciousness is to taste it. So I can sit here and tell you, for half an hour about this really tasty mango I had, but at the end of that, you'll still be like, I'm not sure. It's kind of it tastes sweet. I get a sense of it. I can get the sense of texture and the color, but really nothing like tasting a mango yourself, right? So that's really what I believe in, that it's got to be experiential. And in fact, we could talk about a very simple technique just to do that, instead of one very simple but very, very powerful technique is really, it's a meditative technique where what one would do is simply sit in a beautiful surrounding like this one is good.
Yes, and
but
we want to thank Teresa Hill for
Yes.
this sacred, beautiful space. As always, it's just really amazing.
Absolutely. And this could be in your living room, it could be out in nature, it's fine, whenever you feel comfortable. The first step is really to place your attention here. This is an energy center between the eyebrows. And you could gently lift up your eyes and place your attention there.
So would you look, because people have say that I'm like, okay, if I go cross-eyed, it really gives me a headache. So
Yes.
We're not going cross-eyed, or we're just looking up, or
Exactly.
we are.
Exactly. We're not trying to cross our eyes, but it's gently lifting up and gently, really internally bringing our focus to this point.
Right.
And that's a very key energy center in our body and in our subtle bodies as well.
Why is that?
It's the way we've been designed and constructed. Is really what it is. That this is considered the command center. It's like if you go to a nuclear power station and you go to the control room, where all the knobs and dials are. It's been designed such that from there you can do all kinds of interesting things to control the nuclear power. So this is kind of like that for us. Yes.
I've never heard it put that way.
This is where you could get the master switch for your consciousness, and just by hanging out there, you will start seeing that you will start perceiving reality differently. And even more powerful, what you could do is while hanging out here.
When you say hanging out, what does that look like?
What it looks like is that you are you're internalizing your attention and focusing it here.
So just hang out there, just
hang out there. Just imagine you're living right here, right?
Wow.
And you don't have to put out any huge amount of effort. Very gentle.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're there, you watch your breathing, right? The breathing process is always going on, but most of the time we're not aware of it, right? So pretend that you're a neutral observer. It's like you're almost observing somebody else's breathing. Mm-hmm. So there's an inhalation, there's an exhalation, and over time you'll start seeing there's gaps between the inhalation and exhalation. Just watch it. No attempt to control it, no attempt to slow it, speed it up, judge it at all. Mm-hmm. That's really the technique. You're just hanging out there, watching the breathing, and you could do this for as little as 2 minutes. And after 2 minutes, you will find you're in a different place internally. When you come back, you open your eyes, you feel more solid. You feel like you're no longer at the mercy of the elements, right? You feel, oh, I'm here. There's reality no matter what's happening. It's fine.
Wow.
So that sense of solidity. Furthermore, the more you do this, the more you will see the forest of your own life. So no matter what's happening and what's playing out, you will see, oh, okay, yeah, I see what's going on. Yes, it's a little bit disturbing, but am I completely lost in the disturbance? No. I can see it from 5,000 feet, 10,000 feet, 20,000 feet, and I feel okay about it.
Right.
That is a distinct indicator that you've lifted your consciousness.
Right.
And that's transcendence. And again, it has to be experienced.
Right.
And the more you do it, the more you're like, oh, I know that place, I can go back there. It's
Right.
a place where you know you can go back and be okay.
Yeah.
And over time, you know, you're going 20,000 feet, 30,000 feet, 40,000 feet, you will see not only your own life, you will see everything in your reality from a different place. And at that point, you'll start feeling very differently about suddenly this body is, you don't feel like I'm just this body.
Right.
You feel like I'm something way more. And by the way, I'm living in this body,
Right.
which is a very different sort of feeling.
Well, it's interesting you said that because there was a program or a movie or something that I saw where they actually took these people on the streets of New York on the ground level, and you know the hustle and the bustle and the the whistles and everything so loud,
Yes.
and then they took them to the rooftop of a building
Uh-huh.
and said, first of all, they asked them on the bottom, how are you feeling, what's going on, and people said, how they were feeling was, jittery, jumpy, or anxious.
Yes.
And they got to the top and asked them, now how do you feel? Everybody was like, it's serene, it's quiet, it's a different perspective on top, and that's really what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. That's again awesome analogy.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. As you see instead of being stuck in the traffic jam on 42nd Street in Manhattan,
Right.
you're on top of Empire State Building, and you can see all the traffic. It's flowing. Yeah, you can see there's some traffic jams here and there, but you're feeling really good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, you're not in the stress, you're not in the,
Yeah.
but again, I think being there, and it's about your perspective and being in awareness of, this is how I'm feeling, like I'm feeling anxious, what is coming up for me in the moment? And I know that, if people say, well, that's easy. I mean, like, can you really do that in those moments? I mean, am I great at it? No, but I try to be really aware of, wow, okay, I'm feeling anxious. What's coming up for me?
Yes.
So I think it's
Yes.
asking those questions.
Very much, very, very true. And
Yeah.
in fact, for some people, the transcendence you get better at it. And at one point, you might find yourself on Empire State Building or some very high structure, and it's so blissful, it's so good, and all your problems are so far away. You might feel, this is it. I made it.
Right.
This is what.
Gotta go back down though.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's the next phase, which is integration.
Okay, there you
Because
go.
no matter how high you've gotten, you've got to be able to bring that to your day-to-day reality. And that process is not instantaneous, it's an integration process. And that's where relationships, that's where, making a livelihood, maintaining your health, these things which were like, oh my God, I got to wake up and go to work, these things are actually blessings now because they're going to help you integrate that transcendent experiences.
So how does that happen? Can you kind of give us
How that happens is really anytime you have a conflict. Previously it was me versus you, and there's just this tension, this conflict. Either I've got to win or you're going to win, and it's not a good place to be.
Right.
Well, as you taste this transcendent experience, you start seeing that first of all, you're not fully invested in what you're saying, in the sense that you're not totally sucked into it. Yes, you have a point of view, you have an opinion, totally fine, but you are not attached to it.
Right.
And that makes a huge difference
Yes.
because the other person will also sense that. In fact, they will feel like not being so attached to their own perspective. They'll be encouraged to come out of their little box because they see that you're saying this, but you're coming from a higher place.
Right.
And what happens is, yes, you'll have differences in opinion, but it'll start going down a certain path, but you will see where it's going, and well before it gets to a place where it's not pleasant, you'll pull yourself back.
Right.
That pulling yourself back constantly in these kinds of situations is a big choice, actually.
Yeah.
In fact, you can imagine a situation where something happens, you open an email, and you could see your blood pressure rising, anger building up, and you know this can just keep going, right? You could just get super angry. But now you see the anger building up, and you say, wait a minute, where's that going to take me? Is that going to lead to what's for the highest good?
Mm-hmm.
And you're able to restrain that, and you're able to control that in a way that certainly your reality is different. So now that same situation could have become a very, very unpleasant situation. But now it's not that unpleasant. There's just something that still needs to be worked out. So the integration is just that. Being able to resolve things, being able to rise over things in real time as it's happening.
This is where Einstein talks about being able to solve at this level.
Exactly.
Yes.
So
yes.
this is applying
yes.
that.
Exactly.
And it's, of course, easier said than done, right? It's not like as easy, but you will start the more you do it. And the point is not to be perfect. The point is, can I apply it in a couple of situations? Apply it there. Then you feel more confidence. You apply it in a couple more, and you kind of build from there. And pretty soon your entire life looks very different.
Right, and what I just heard too was it's really not about moving through this so fast. Like, let me just like bam, bam, bam and get this over. I mean, I would like it that way, but I think we lose the essence, the something I don't even know what it is, but I think we lose something in it. So I think there's something to be said for being in that situation that we may not feel very distressing. And to really stay in that, not to where you're, dwelling in it, but can you comment to that?
That's a great point. And this comes up a lot, especially with relationships, where we've got emotions, and for some reason nobody teaches us, as we are going through high school or whatever, what is this thing called emotions, and how do you deal with it? Because it's so it's got such a strong influence on our lives.
Well, don't you think too, and I'll let you finish, but don't you think too that, because I feel that the viewers and listeners, as we grow up, we're taught to, don't cry, or don't get angry. Angry's not good. So we're taught to really stuff our emotions.
Exactly.
Really.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the other part of emotions. We start discovering these emotions. They're very powerful, and on top of that, we want to maintain this sort of persona of I'm a nice person. So that leads to just suppress it. Just deal with it in private or whatever. Even better still. These days it's just go check your Facebook stream one more time, or go to Google Plus, or do something else, because if you distract yourself, you're kind of suppressing it in a certain way by not dealing with it.
Or that people overwork, or people drink, or
exactly.
Yes, I used to shop.
Yes, so all are all great. We've gotten really good, right?
Yes.
In fact, most middle-aged people, they've figured out just the right set of things that work really well for them. And they feel, I have life figured out.
Yeah.
Just the right wine at the right time, and etc. Well.
That's really true.
So but actually the reality is emotions are actually a great feedback mechanism for us. And in fact, even the negative emotions, it's absolutely nothing wrong with being angry, nothing wrong with feeling sad. All these are a natural part of being human. However, the problem is to be not aware of them and to have them run the lives instead of having some way of managing them. And managing them, what I mean is not suppressing them, nor do I mean expressing them, because either of those extremes can be problematic.
But you don't think emoting?
Emoting is good when one is very conscious and aware of the situation and uses the emoting and expression in a very skillful way.
Okay, true. Good point. Because if you're not...
Otherwise, it just causes a lot of inharmony. It can cause a lot of pain for other people. And eventually we might ourselves go back and feel like, oh, why did I say that? I didn't mean to really hurt that person. I was trying to express myself, right? It leads to a lot of situations like that. So
What if you weren't able to, I'm sorry, what if you weren't able to, what if you didn't have to emote to that person?
Mm-hmm.
What if you were able to emote, like if I was mad at someone and then I didn't really say it to them because I knew they weren't in the consciousness, right? And I didn't want to say that to them, but I have these feelings that have to be said.
Right.
What if I just said it in my own house, whatever.
That's a better way of releasing the emotion for
Okay.
sure. That's for sure. Actually, what happens is even as the emotion is rising, if we're able to catch it early on, in other words, if our awareness is such that we see very early on, I'm seeing this anger bubble up within me, that's the first thing to do, to notice the emotion even while it's bubbling up. Not wait till it's already, there's an explosion, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens is there's lots of choices that are available. If you're aware of it, there's a choice. If you're not aware of it, you're unconscious, and before you know, something has happened, and then you're like, oh my God, I said this.
Yeah, you don't feel like you have a choice.
Then there's no choice until later. So first of all, you recognize it, and then you actually invite it, actually. Even if it's a negative emotion,
You what?
you invite the emotion. You embrace it. You say, come on, no problem. I'm feeling really sad. It's okay. I'll feel it. So fully feeling that emotion is very important, because it's not a matter of totally putting that emotion in a box somewhere that I'm going to deal with this over the weekend, right? You want to feel it right then.
But here you're saying is really acknowledging, right?
Acknowledging it, feeling it.
Yes.
And then there's still a choice. Now, in the outside world, do I want to express something? Do I want to just deal with this in private? Or do I want to just go home and journal about it? Or whatever. And there's no simple answer for that, which I would say just do this all the time. In many situations, you might find, wait a minute, there's something wrong here, and I should speak up. And you should. But speaking from a place of awareness, and while keeping the highest good in mind, comes out very differently.
Would that be the same thing as coming from your truth and speaking your truth, but coming from a heart place?
That is, yes, it is very close to that. If you're staying in touch with your heart, and not only just my heart, but the larger heart, then you are being automatically compassionate to the other person as well, because they have a heart too. It's not just my heart. So you would automatically be considerate, compassionate, see that maybe this person's really having a bad day. Maybe I just need to tell them, but not today, maybe tomorrow. That's already a compassionate choice. And tomorrow you can have a chat with the person, you still get your point across, but it's the whole dynamic is very different. It didn't lead to this very traumatic situation.
Well, it kind of reminds me of, sometimes when I was married, or, and I would say even to my kids, I need a timeout. I need a timeout to kind of go and just count, or even with my ex-husband, it's like I need a timeout just to kind of really gather my thoughts together and really kind of feel like what was really kind of happening.
That's a great thing, count to 10, count to 100, whatever.
Yes.
That's great, because that's already saying, I am seeing that this thing is going in a direction where I want to actually make sure that it doesn't explode. So I'm going to take a time out. So that's a great way to manage what's happening. So emotions, again, one becomes more aware of these things as you start touching that transcendent place. That indeed you feel there's something more to me than my emotions. So I'm having these emotions, but these are not just, this is not all of me. So that's a very powerful place to be.
So what you're saying is because I've heard this, I did a course, and I can't remember the name of the organization, but they were saying you are not your emotions. We are not really any of this.
Exactly. You're having those emotions.
Right.
So that's a big shift in perspective. Yes. That's a huge shift. And integration is this process of having dozens and dozens of experiences, which life is presenting us constantly, right?
Well, for growth and evolution.
For growth and evolution. But now, transcendence gives you a place where you can play this whole game, but without getting totally sucked into it, without feeling drained. Now you're like, okay, there's a bigger picture. I know what the bigger picture is. I'm going to play this from that place. In fact, there's a great quote from the French mystic, Teilhard de Chardin. He said, we're not human beings searching for a spiritual experience.
Oh, yes.
We're spiritual beings having a human experience. We're spiritual beings immersed in a human experience. And when you really get that, that's a huge, huge breakthrough.
And not getting it from an intellectual, because that's where it's not, I've learned that. It's not getting it here, but it's really embodying that.
Yes.
Yeah, getting it at a different level.
Exactly. And in fact, that's a great point, because that's the third phase, embodiment.
Ah, there you go.
Because embodying is basically saying, yes, I've seen the transcendent states. Yes, I've integrated. And in fact, integration is another key point with integration before we leave that topic is sometimes what happens is some part of ourselves, our being, is able to taste this really high transcendent experience. But some aspects of us are still down here, right? So there is this sort of disconnection between parts of us and which are up here, parts of us which are down here. And you could call it, the shadow side, if you will. Parts of me that I just don't want to deal with, because that's where I've had, all the skeletons are locked up there. And its integration is letting the light come in to all those closets that have those skeletons. Right. So it's taking all aspects of ourselves to that place, which is transcendent. So at that point, you're ready to really embody. Yeah.
I really want to bring something up, because what came to me, and it's kind of funny in a way, but it's really, if you watch the movie Peter Pan, when he danced with his shadow. He became friends with his shadow. So, and really, he was all about being able to fly, was about thinking happy thoughts. So it's just interesting that you said that's what came to me. So I think it's a really good analogy for people to, like you said, I think it's really important to love every aspect of ourselves.
Yes.
Knowing that I can be this way at a certain time, I can be this way at a certain time, and that's okay.
Yes.
But I personally would say, okay, why am I being that way? I would kind of look more further into it, but.
Yes. And for a lot of us, even as we experience these transcendent states, when we come back to the usual reality, and we are actually feeling these things pretty strongly, right. We feel angry and we feel, this is not right, I shouldn't be feeling angry, or feeling selfish, feeling greedy. We feel suddenly these are like, this is not spiritual stuff. I shouldn't be feeling these things, and I'm a really spiritual person. And you can almost get into a really weird almost distorted place where there's two aspects of you. One is really holy, spiritual, radiant, and then there are times where it's really dark. So integration addresses that. It takes all the places within you, and it's not a matter of saying I'm going to be suddenly a totally different person in every way. Even if you're selfish, but you are fully embracing that selfishness. If you're greedy, but you're fully embracing your greediness, suddenly that greediness is just no big deal.
But isn't that really going back to the same thing as, or is it going back to, this is really a question, of going back to speaking your truth, that yes, I do feel greedy, yes, I am angry, yes, I am selfish.
Yes. The thing is, it's way back in the beginning of the journey, it's very hard for me to admit I'm a really greedy person, because I'm so invested in myself. But as I see a larger picture, now I see there's a part of me that's beyond everything. Now it's like saying I'm greedy. I can say that now. I can speak the truth, but now there is a larger context which allows me to speak that truth. And in fact, in my life coaching practice, a lot of times that's what I do with people. Help them see that their life situation, while it's still no different than it was 5 minutes back, but stepping back and seeing this bird's eye view, that itself is transformative. And of course, for that to be durable, it takes a lot of work, it takes time, and it takes this integration process. And eventually, one reaches a point where, much of our being is now at that higher frequency. At that point, somebody might say, well, I'm done. Well, you're not done yet, right? There's lots of places along the way where you feel like, okay, I'm done now. Well, embodiment turns out to be a very key aspect. In fact, that's where you really prove that you got it. Until then, it's like, yeah, it sounds good. But embodiment is when you show the world that you got it. Yeah. And exactly. Not so much everybody, having everybody turn into a spiritual teacher. It's about, if you're a construction worker, if you're a landscaper, it doesn't matter. It's bringing that authentic realization and presence to whatever situation you happen to be in.
And does this go into what I hear is also what you're saying is this goes into showing up as who we really are?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's really knowing what's one's life purpose is, who
Right.
one really is, and then bringing that presence, bringing that beingness, bringing that radiance to every situation, no matter how mundane it might be. And when one does that, Earth looks very different. And that's really where we want to get to, where there's embodied beings, fully embodied beings who realize their true nature and are living it. That really results in other people who see that, and that's when they say, this person, they have some quality that I sure would like.
Right.
And this person might not have said a word, right? They're just living from that embodied
Being.
place. They're just being that.
Yeah.
And that's when you could say you're a exemplar, or an ambassador, an emissary of the divine, of the highest. And you're walking the planet. You're a blessing, just being.
Right. What would you say is the distinction between, when you talk about we're just showing up as who we are, but yet as we know who we really are, because we know if we're really love and light, we're a spiritual being, which is love and light. It really isn't this physical form.
Yes.
So can you give us the distinction so they can the viewers must have an idea of what that really, because it's very confusing when you say, okay, here I'm a light and loving being, spiritual being, but yet I show up as this being, just being in the world.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
it's just, yeah.
And this is where the difference is. One could read a whole book about this and start sort of pretending that one is, saying the right things and pretending to be in an exalted state of some kind. And the reality is we cannot fool the universe, first of all.
No, can't lie to it either.
And,
No.
and speaking the truth takes on different meanings, because the truth is, what have I realized the truth to be? That's the highest truth I can speak, right? So even if one tries to speak a truth that sounds really good, it's not really truth for that person. They haven't realized it. So what happens is, until one has actually transcended, tasted the higher states of consciousness, done the integration, then they speak the truth. That truth, their truth, is something they've realized. And that's something, when they are being, their beingness is this expansive state. So one cannot, in other words, mimic that without going through the process. So the difference ends up being, you actually have to shift your consciousness. You actually have to realize truth. Then you have to embody truth. And whatever you embody automatically has that pristine quality to it, which is coming from a pure place. Right. So intellectually, it can sound the same, and it's hard to tell the difference.
Right.
Just from it looks the same, it sounds the same, but the vibration is different.
Got it.
The vibration is very different. And this is where the journey also takes us. Our personal vibration starts shifting, and you start feeling that in different ways. The universe gives you feedback, lots of feedback actually. Yeah. And good and bad. So you start seeing, if you're trying to fake your vibration, you'll get a lot of feedback which shows that, wait a minute, that's not quite what I was vibrating at. At the same time, if your vibration is pure and high, you will find that a very scary situation can just pass right through you, because you're at that level of consciousness where it's not disturbing your internal knowingness. So again, that is something, it's in the realm of experience.
Right.
And that's really how it should be.
Yes.
It's not from any book, not from any workshop. But things that do help are things like creating space in one's life, even in little ways, like instead of sitting and watching TV, you could take a walk. Right. Shifts your consciousness. Hanging out with people who are of higher vibration.
Yes.
That's a good thing. Even if you're going to pick up a book which is high vibration, is uplifting. Right. If you're going to watch a movie, watch an inspiring movie.
Right.
So there's lots of ways when these are all contributing.
Right.
They're all picking up the vibration. And if you do enough of these, you will find that in a matter of months, years, you're in a different place. If you run into an old friend, they'll say, wow, you feel different. You
Yeah.
feel you feel good.
Yeah, something's different about
I
you.
can't
yeah.
tell you about all the spiritual, metaphysical stuff, but it feels good to be with you. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
That is saying not only that you've touched some really high places, but you're embodying that.
And I think we have a question too.
Yep.
So, can both of you comment more on how important it is to have experiences with other people as part of integration? Sometimes spirituality is talked about in very individualistic terms. In other words, can we share spirituality?
Yes. So relationships with people turns out is a excellent news in terms of growing. Right?
Great question. Thank you.
And what we see is those tensions that exist naturally between people. These tensions previously were daunting, were a little bit scary. They were like, oh my God, how do I convince this person about my point of view? And we might even dread, going to a meeting where we have to convince people about a certain perspective. Or even it could be a one-on-one kind of relationship with a friend where, you're close to the friend, but there's one key issue on which you see totally differently, right? And that can make the relationship seem like, it should be closer, but it's not.
Right.
Well, these are all very, very good places for integration, where you can see that, first of all, you could, even as you approach the relationship, your intention, even before the first interaction happens, is very, very significant. Previously, the intention was probably unconscious. We just run into people, we try to be good, we're hoping we'll have a good time, and all will be well. That's pretty much our unspoken intention. But as we get into a conscious journey of growth, our intention is, first of all, to grow from that situation and be of help to others.
Right.
And even the outcome we want is not necessarily what our personal agenda is. Our outcome, our preference is let whatever is for the highest good, let that come forth.
Right.
This is a dramatic difference now, because even when you start having that first conversation, that first dialogue, you're vibrating at a completely different place. You're in a very different place. And other people will sense that, consciously or unconsciously. And they will instantly feel like they need to not be so stuck to their agendas,
Right.
but instead look a little bit closer at what you're saying, and maybe look a little deeper at what they really want. Already there's a sense of expansiveness, there's a sense of cooperation, and that is spirituality in action, right? Spirituality is not about talking about spiritual stuff at all.
Right.
It is not, it's about not being stuck in our own small identities, and instead being expansive. And if you're expansive, there's so many ways to be expansive. If you're expansive in any of those ways, you are already bringing spirituality.
Well, I think you help the other person too. I know in my own experience, if there is in the talk about integrating, if we have an opinion or they have an opinion, because since we're so individually unique, that everyone's going to have their own opinion based through their own experiences, their own filters. So what I've learned to do is to really listen to that other person's, because I may gain something from their opinion. So I'm looking at it from, wow, that's really interesting. So allowing them and not saying, okay, this is mine, this is the way I see it, right? So it's like opening up that door and going, okay, let me allow this person to be able to share what their opinion is based on whatever that is. And so I could shift my perspective going, wow, I really like that. I love how you see that a different way. I've never looked at it that way. So maybe that's something I might chew on, I might take a look at and see. So I think if we are involved in any kind of relationship, it doesn't matter if it's career or you're looking to buy something for someone, really in every experience, I think it's really being open to the possibility of that they could have something to offer that you may not know.
Excellent point.
Yeah,
Excellent point. Very true. And in fact, the funny thing is, as you truly listen with an open mind, they can sense that, they feel heard,
Right.
and
Keyword, it's being heard.
they feel heard, and then they are going to also pay more attention to
you-
what
yes,
you're talking about.
And they may shift their perspective,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
We have another question too, so.
Mhm.
Okay, how can we distinguish actual truth from our emotions versus past similar experiences that may be coloring or influencing our perception?
That's a great question.
Wow, great question as
Yeah,
well.
that's a great question. Well, our emotions tend to be so strong, especially if we haven't invested, a good period of time trying to corral them, trying to manage them. They tend to be the dominant voice. Before we know it, we get carried away with our emotions, and that's why this is a great question, because
Thank you.
it can seem like, what do you mean truth? This is what is truth. This is how I'm feeling, and it does take a lot before we can recognize that, first of all, yes, there's the emotion bubbling up. Yes, this is what my emotion is saying, and the more you get in touch with a deeper place in yourself, the more you're able to disengage from your own emotion enough so that you can see the larger perspective, the deeper perspective. And to be honest, this is not an overnight thing. It does take a very conscious effort. And sometimes the emotions are going to be so strong that it's like you don't even want to hear anything else. That's where we shut out truth. By saying my emotion is so strong, this is the absolute truth, don't even bother telling me anything else. That's when truth has a hard time getting in.
Yeah.
But if we're willing to say, okay, I'm feeling a lot of emotion, but I'm inviting truth in, the truth will come in various ways.
Right.
It might come in very surprising ways. It might come in, if you're in a meeting, somebody else out there might speak up something, and you instantly recognize that's not what I'm saying, but I actually feel that's a good place for us to go to.
Right.
So don't expect this booming voice inside your head to be telling you this is truth and this is what you ought to do.
Yeah.
It can be very subtle. It can come through various places.
Absolutely.
It can come through an unrelated email, or somebody forwards you something which is an inspiring picture. This has nothing to do with your situation. But then you see it and it's like, wait a minute, it does.
Right.
It's telling me exactly how to view my situation in a different way, and that makes me feel like it's a better, deeper truth.
Right. I know for myself, and speaking and determining or distinguishing between truth and emotions, is that just what you sort of said, in a way of taking and having the emotion and emoting whatever that emotion is, to allow myself to feel that. So what I'm saying is to feel that, allow that to surface, and then it's almost like coming back up to the rooftop from the bird's eye view and going, and really checking in with myself and saying, okay, I've just had an experience, I've been angry, sad, crying, or whatever. Now, what is the truth? What's really happening here? So for me, I tend to ask a lot of questions. I mean, if anybody's heard me or saw me, maybe thinking that we got to send her and put her in a straitjacket because this girl's not, really with us. But I feel that it really does, for me, works that way of asking myself, okay, what is really my truth in my world? Because I'm a chunk of totality of the universe, whatever you want to call that, the God spirit, I'm a chunk of that. So what is the truth in my world? But it's only after I feel the feelings, because like you said, you really can't have those feelings and find the truth within that.
Yes.
So that really works for me in doing it that way.
Very good point. Also, the question talked about, past unresolved things coloring the current situation.
Yes.
That's a very important thing to be, first of all, aware of.
Yes.
And actually work on. So that's the kind of thing where, when one goes on a retreat, or even if there's a weekend where you have, relatively a couple of hours free and you can work on something, to really go through forgiveness exercises, to go through emotional release exercises, or even journaling is great, where you can write whatever is on your mind from the past that's bothering you. These things are really critical to clear the slate. Because without that, any situation you go into, you're bringing a backpack full of rocks that are going to bog you down. And even before the other person really gets worked up, you're already worked up. And so you're escalating the situation from your end. and really contributing to the problem at that point. So clearing one's slate is critical, and that can include things like clearing one's internal energies, which could be, these stuck emotions are in our energy field. And these energy fields actually are constantly influencing us. Even the people we run into, the jobs we feel attracted to, the co-workers we feel drawn to, these are all coming from influences from our energy field. So without knowing it, we might be drawing ourselves to situations which are saying you better clear these things, right? And typically those are not so pleasant experiences. So it's a lot better to set aside a weekend, clear it up the easy way, and go with a clear energy field to the world and draw positive experiences.
Well, do you think too, because I know from my own experience that there's never going to possibly be an ever ending of clearing. I mean, I feel like just when I think, oh my gosh, I've just got all this stuff from my past cleared up, and bam, something else happens. So I think in that question, taking the past, and that's where the truth is really, if I'm reacting, it's always, or justifying, it's always coming from a past. So I'm looking at, okay, where in my past, it could have been in school, it could have been with my siblings, it could have been with my father, it could have been in the church, it could have been a multitude of things. So again, I'm looking at, in the past, maybe, my dad and what, their rules and their morals and their values, that was their truth. Maybe that's not my truth, right? So again, it's when you talk about that, it is clearing that up and bringing that. So I think it's looking in those moments. We're always going to be working on something. It's not like we're going to have everything.
It's a process.
It's a process, and
Absolutely.
Until and we may come back in another lifetime. Who knows? But yeah, I think just to always take a look at when something is happening. If you're reacting or you're trying to justify, then that's coming from a past.
That's right.
And it's really looking at that.
That brings up a great point, which is anytime something happens, we instantly tell ourselves a story about it, and we assume that is what happened, right?
Right.
That's really based on our perception, our belief systems. It's really an interpretation of what happened.
Yes.
And we confuse that with what really happened. In fact, Winston Churchill said something great. He said history is simply one damn thing after another. And when we look back on our personal history, right, it can seem that way, right? It's just one damn thing after another.
Well, and also history repeats itself.
And so history repeats itself if you don't do anything about it.
Exactly. So it's going to come back around. So that's why I say nip it in the bud now, get it over with, and that's why it's living consciously and that's why we do the show. It's really raising the consciousness. And we got about 10 minutes, so I want to be sure that they get a hold of you. He's a life coach, a teacher, a visionary. So can you let the viewers and listeners know how they can get in touch with you to know more about what Suresh does, any of the work, his workshops, classes?
Absolutely, yes. The best place to find out all that is my website, which is lucidfield.com, lucidfield.com. And there you'll see all the things I'm up to, events that are coming up, and other ways we can engage.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't get a chance to talk about the lucid field, which is very fascinating as well. So you can ask him questions and get to know more about him through that as well, and what that's all about. Very, very fascinating. And that you had actually, that's your baby. That's something that you.
Yeah, it's all about consciousness. It's all about technology. It's all about wellness. All these passions coming together.
Yeah, they're coming into one. So thank you so much for being on the show today. We really greatly appreciate it. We thank Teresa Hill for allowing us to film again in the sacred space. And we thank Alan, and we thank our viewer, Alan, for being, filming and being here to make this a possibility and a reality. And we also want to thank you, the viewers and listeners, for tuning in today. And if you did miss the show today, no worries, because you can always go to our YouTube channel and just do a search for Conscious Awareness TV, and you can find us there. And next week we have Jeannie Lemaire, who is going to be my colleague, and we're going to be talking actually about the emerging self. So look for lots of changes starting next week on a new venue, new everything, and so things are going to look very different. So again, we thank you so much for tuning in and joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.